While diplomatic talks continue against a possible Russian invasion, countries in Eastern Europe have boosted military training. Russia and its all-weather ally Belarus have begun their 10-day drills. Jets and tanks were seen in the footage released from the northern Ukrainian border. Multiple rocket launchers fired salvos. While the timing is uncanny, both nations claim that the exercises have nothing to do with the ongoing tensions with Ukraine. A similar scene unfolded at the southern Ukrainian border, where 30 Russian ships were seen conducting training exercises near Crimea, a region which was annexed by Russia in 2014. Russia's military moves are being closely scrutinized by the West. Moscow says it is maintaining its own security, but NATO calls it a hawkish move. Around 30 kilometers away from Crimea, Ukrainian law enforcement forces held drills to prepare for a timely response against an invasion. Police officers, national and border guards took part in the exercise. Meanwhile, a $200 million security package reached Ukraine. This is another consignment of weapons sent by the United States. Pallets with weapons were loaded off a plane in the capital city. Russia has dominated in the Black Sea region with its military. But amid rising tensions with Ukraine and the West, NATO has decided or decided to consider a long-term presence in the sea as well, which is why Romania has welcomed NATO troops in the region. US troops are already stationed near the Romania-Ukraine border. Tensions continue to simmer in East Europe. In the middle of high-stakes talks, diplomacy taking its fifth gear, the uncreative over the Ukraine border remain high. Now, the West has raised alarm of an imminent invasion, and Kremlin, that has readily assured of no intent to invade, has followed suit. Russia has announced that it will optimize its diplomatic staff numbers in Ukraine. What this means is that Moscow has pulled out some of its diplomatic staff from Kyiv, fearing provocations from the Zelensky administration. This comes shortly after the US warned that Russia is deploying more troops at the Ukraine border, saying that an attack can come anytime soon. Washington has ordered all its emergency staff to leave Kyiv urgently, while the British envoy to Ukraine tweeted that she and her core team will stay in Kyiv after London asked all its nationals to leave Ukraine now by commercial means. Meanwhile, Germany has also advised its nationals, mainly the non-emergency staff, to leave Ukraine.
Simply put, we continue to see very troubling signs of Russian escalation, including new forces arriving at the Ukrainian border.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken on Friday warned that Russia is massing yet more troops near Ukraine and could attack in days or weeks.
We're in a window when an invasion could begin at any time.
Commercial satellite images by a private firm showed what it said were new Russian military tents in Crimea and extra troops, military vehicles, and helicopters at an airfield in Belarus. Russia has already amassed more than 100,000 troops near Ukraine, and this week it launched joint military exercises in neighboring Belarus and naval drills in the Black Sea. To counter the growing Russian threat, the U.S. deployed forces to Poland and Romania. On Friday, a shipment of American weapons arrived in Kyiv, and this week Ukrainian forces staged their own exercises. Blinken on Friday urged Americans still in Ukraine to get out.
Any American citizens who remain in Ukraine should leave now.
U.S. President Joe Biden put it in even starker terms, telling NBC News, quote, "Things could get crazy quickly," and saying he would not risk American troops to rescue U.S. citizens in the event of a Russian assault. Moscow denies it is planning an invasion and called the Western military maneuvers provocations meant to bait Russia into war. But diplomatic efforts to resolve the crisis have yet to yield results.
I was clear about the tragic consequences that any invasion of Ukraine could have. for all people, both Ukrainian, Russia and the security of Europe.
UK Defence Secretary Ben Wallace was the latest European official to meet with Russian counterparts in Moscow this week.
We listened to the assurances given by Minister Shoigu and indeed General Gerasimov that they would not invade Ukraine.
Wallace on Friday said both sides affirmed that diplomacy was preferred over armed conflict.
We're still on that, and our executive editor Palki Sharma has sent us this report from Ground Zero, Kyiv. Watch.
About its business, people understand the risks, people understand the threat involved, but letting fear win would be letting Russia win. So they are carrying on with their life as they would on any other day. Having said that, it does not inspire confidence when Ukraine's topmost ally, foremost ally, the US, asks its citizens to leave. The warnings have become more ominous by the day. We've seen what the American president has said repeatedly, saying that he will not send troops to evacuate citizens and the time to leave is now. They're evacuating the US embassy. The Australians and the government of New Zealand has issued similar advisories and orders to its people to leave Ukraine as soon as possible. The Russians are calling it war hysteria. They say that the Americans are mounting a panic campaign. But even here in Ukraine, the people say that this does not inspire confidence and there is no need for such an evacuation. And remember, the US has been calling the threat of war imminent for weeks now. And the memories of Afghanistan are still fresh in the minds of people here, where the American intelligence assessment said that Kabul would fall in 6 months. It fell within days. So when we speak to people, they draw parallels and they say, look at what happened in Afghanistan. We don't trust these doomsday predictions and that war is not going to happen. When you hear them say, there is a mix of hope, there is a mix of tension. I don't think those are realistic assessments of people. I think they hope that there is no war, and that is what they say when they speak to the press especially. There is no denying that. We've seen the kind of shuttle diplomacy that we saw all of this week. Olaf Scholz going to Washington, D.C., Emmanuel Macron coming here in Kiev before he after he went to Moscow, in fact, and then he went to Berlin. We've seen talks. The Russians say that they are going to raise NATO deployments at the United Nations Security Council on the 17th of February. So the Europeans are talking. The Europeans are also, some countries at least, like Denmark, changing their policy to allow American troops to be stationed in their country. The Slovak government, despite all the protests and the scenes in parliament that we saw, has allowed American troops to be stationed in 2 Air Force bases for the next 10 years. Free of charge. So European countries are gearing up because they feel that if today it's Ukraine, tomorrow it could be one of them, especially countries in Eastern Europe. So this pressure building tactic of Moscow could backfire. If it wants NATO to be away from its borders, it may be pushing the countries on its periphery to do the very opposite and go closer to NATO as these countries seek security guarantees. If they do not want to live under the shadow of Russia, they will need a powerful guarantor like the NATO, like the European Union, or like the Americans. The European bloc is divided in the sense that some governments are not very keen to be on board and they do not fight what they call America's war, like we heard from a French minister say that we don't want to be pushed into fighting with the Russians over Nord Stream 2 just because America wants to do that. So the consensus on one point is clear, that they do not want a war. How do they want to go about ensuring that there is no war is still something that the Europeans are trying to figure out.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.